As people grow up and go out and experience the world, everyone's bound to change who you are. The person you are today could be a very different person you were yesterday, and that's what makes people so interesting. We grow, we adapt, and we change to the environment that we're in. We are always evolving and we're always changing. However, as many times as people do change for the good, there are always people that change for the worse. And that's where Man-Kokou no Hito becomes very interesting. It's a manga that's main premise is about mountain climbing. However, what really hooked me was the inner psyche of these characters throughout the story and their reasoning for changing who they are as a person. However, the character that really made me fall in love with this manga was our main character, Mori. Mori is a very complex character, as he's very introverted come the start of this manga. However, even though he's still an introvert come the end of the manga, he's found a place he can call home, but it's a long, brutal journey before he gets to this point in his life. You see, at the beginning of this manga, you could pinpoint the reason for Mori being an introvert was due to a person he knew being stuck in a coma that is alluded to something he could have prevented. However, there aren't many details on this topic because this topic was trashed very on in the manga. However, what is interesting is Mori seems to carry a burden that's all his fault. In some bits and pieces, you can see why Mori feels this way. However, blaming himself and having others blame him really isn't right because sometimes things happen. And this is a recurring thing throughout this whole manga. The reason Mori wants to be alone is because he feels that whenever he's involved in some way, it always ends up in a bad situation. And thanks to the storytelling of this manga, he's not wrong. There was time and time again where things just kept happening, but they were all out of Mori's hands. First, it was the disbandment of the mountain climbing club. It got disbanded because Mori got caught on photos doing a dangerous mountain climb. However, what these photos don't tell you is the reason why Mori was doing this dangerous mountain climb was to save a classmate that was a member of the mountain climbing club. Even though this happens early on in the manga, there were small changes you could see happening in Mori, such as him smiling a bit more. However, after this whole incident, Mori chooses that it's better for him to be alone, which is so crushing to see because we were going to see him start changing, start opening up himself, start seeing the world. But because someone took some photos and didn't have context with it, it all got crushed before our eyes. Next is the death of one of Mori's teachers, Maso. This is one of the only events in this manga where you can link this to Mori and say, yeah, this is partially your fault. Mori decides to go mountain climbing on his own. However, this would have been the first time mountain climbing in a snow system, which is a very different from your normal mountain climb. But Mori ignores this and continues to climb and ends up getting caught in a snowstorm in the mountains without his proper gear. And once his teacher hears about this, he heads up the mountain to look for Mori. But during the process, he ends up being hit by an avalanche, something that takes him out right away. Once Mori is rescued and told his teachers passed away, Mori doesn't say much of anything. However, you can just tell it's completely broken him. And this is what I like to believe would be the end of this prologue of the manga. Because with what I tried to explain and what the manga has shown us, we get to see and understand Mori a good amount here. He is a very flawed and to a point very naive person of the world around him. And this is where I would like to believe that it's the end of the prologue of this manga. Because with what I tried to explain to you and what the manga has shown us, we understand Mori a bit here. He's a very flawed character, and he's also very naive about the world around him. However, the second half of this manga is where Mori starts to change and it goes on like a self-discovery, and this is also where I would call this manga very masterful. The second part of this manga is easily some of the best written works I have ever read, mainly due to Mori's growth as a person, but also due to the fact that the artwork in the second half of the manga is so terrifying. Because you can relate it to how Mori's inner psyche is working during these events. Let me start off by explaining how Mori is as a person come the second half of this manga. I am going to cut some details to speed things up, so bear with me here. He's very similar to how he was at the beginning of this manga. However, you can tell he stays away from people now and doesn't talk to others. He's more focused on his job and planning how he wants to go climbing later. In social situations, Mori falls very flat on himself. He doesn't really stand up for himself and doesn't know how to say no to someone when there is something he doesn't want to do. He just allows people to use him for their own gain. Then there's the K2 Summit, a dangerous mountain climb where only the best mountain climbers are selected, and Mori is a part of that group. However, he is the only one to make it down alive from the selection of people. This in turn causes Mori to help one of the members' girlfriends out for a while, because at the time she was pregnant But since her boyfriend died on the summit with Mori, he feels responsible to at least help her out here and now. This is who Mori is and who he's become. A person who has become an introvert due to events out of his hand. But he just kept drawing bad hands one after another, and he truly believes he is the cause of all the problems that has happened to him. He also now believes he should just be alone because of what happens, because it always turns out bad for him no matter what he tries or what he does. And in that case, it forces him to be away from people. And it's clearly depicted that he suffers from horrible social anxiety as depicted through the artwork, but you can also, Mori is starting to suffer a lot with depression. That is also depicted through the artwork. Mori is just someone who can't catch a break, but things start to change once Mori gets a new job studying mountains. Mori has gotten to know mountains a lot through his journey, and someone besides Maso saw potential in him and asked him to join his team studying mountains. And what do you know? Mori's an outstanding person doing this. It's one of the first times we get to see Mori look somewhat happy in the environment that he's in. Whether or not that's because he's doing something he likes, or is it because someone has full faith in him. Whatever the case is, Mori is actually happy during this time. But that's not all though. Mori meets Hana, someone Mori starts to bond with a lot, because Hana has always been an outcast due to her, quote, weird ways. Mori and Hana start dating, then comes their wedding, and then finally comes settling down and having a family with their first child. For the very first time in this whole manga, Mori looks and sounds happy. However, there is still one thing holding him back, and that's his love for mountains. When no one stood beside him and no one was there for him, the mountains were his escape from everything bad. They don't blame him for anything bad that was happening. The mountains are always on his side. And in one last shot, Mori decides to go back to the K2 summit and climb it all the way. The same mountain that took away his old team's lives. This time, however, he decides to go climbing with an old acquaintance of his, Takumura. Takumura looks up to Mori because despite everything, Mori is a very accomplished mountain climber with a lot of things to back it up. However, Takumura wants to climb the mountain for fame, while Mori wants to climb it to put an end to everything. In this climb, Takumura does pass away, and you would think Mori would climb down because of the risk factor because he doesn't have a partner anymore. But nope, he keeps moving forward with the climb. And it's in these last 30 or so chapters, I think I truly realized I loved this manga a lot, and came to the conclusion it's masterful without even reading the end of it all yet. These last chapters, we see Mori go through this not crisis, but a change of who he is now compared to who he was then. There's two different Moris that we're experiencing at the same time. And not only that, we got to see what people think of Mori. We got to see how thankful they are for him, which is very funny because Mori always thought he was a burden on people somewhere and just believed he didn't belong anywhere. Because of everything he did, it always ended up backfiring on him, and it always ended up being more damaged than good things happening. However, he's the only one that actually believed that. Sure, there were a handful of times where his actions affected someone in a bad light, but that's all Mori saw and accepted that. He never saw the good impact he left on people. He brought people together without even knowing it, while unknowingly brought light into their lives as well. Then there was the inner fight of Mori during this last stretch. It was the battle between living or dying on this mountain. The Mori we had throughout the most part of this journey in this manga would have probably accepted his fate at the hands of the mountain, and he probably would have passed with a smile on his face. But this Mori that we've had come the second half is very different. He wants to live. He wants to go home to his family. He doesn't want to pass yet. He wants to grow old with his wife. He wants to see his child grow up. He wants to live. The inner struggle is the most saddest yet most happiest I've ever been with this manga. We have been with Mori for the lowest of lows in his life, but the light at the end of the tunnel showed us that Mori wants to live, and Mori decides he's not going to lose his life here. He's able to complete the K2 summit. However, coming down the mountain, he does lose a few limbs along the way. However, at the very end of this manga, we see Mori on top of a rock, showcasing one of the biggest smiles I've ever seen him put on. Mori is a very hard character to understand because, you know, there's a lot of psyche things that you gotta get to, and I don't think I could ever do it justice talking about the inner psyche of someone, especially a character like Mori. However, I do think a lot of people are able to relate to him a lot, and that's why he's such an outstanding character. There's a lot of us out there who think the world's against them. Every step they took was wrong, everything they've done is wrong, everything they say is wrong, and we only focus on the negatives. But even then, a person like Mori, who basically had the world against him, was able to find a place that he can call home. He's a changed man, he was able to have a family, he was able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's such an inspiration to see. He overcame a lot, and just seeing him smile on that last page, on this journey, brought a tear to my eye. Mori is truly one of my all-time greatest characters that I've ever had the chance of reading about. This is the end of the video, and I hope you all enjoyed it. And until the next video, I will talk to you all later.